We have a guest speaker. If you're not aware, Jim Holson is here and he is presenting on King Solomon's Guide to Fantastic Finances. And we had a wonderful time yesterday afternoon. And I know we had a wonderful time in class this morning, and I know he'll have a wonderful sermon for us. I wanted to get up and just share a little bit about Jim for those who weren't here yesterday, so you know who's speaking to you. I met Jim through his son James, who is over in the bright yellow shirt over here, when we were in college. And Jim yesterday kind of discussed the idea just in passing about we all kind of have these people that we turn to and we call and we ask questions of, and Jim gets to field a lot of my questions for me. So he is a wonderful man of God. He is a wonderful preacher, wonderful teacher, and I know wonderful family man as well. A little bit about Jim is that he has taught full-time at Great Lakes Bible College in Waterloo, Ontario since the fall of 2007. And he also regularly preaches for the Oma Church of Christ in Milton, Ontario, a subdivision. We do forgive him for being from Canada, but he is a native United Statesian, I guess. So who knows, maybe he'll throw an A every once in a while into our discussion today. I keep asking, but he hasn't done it yet. Prior to teaching full-time, Jim served in full-time preaching in the U.S. He served in Iowa, New York, and Illinois, and he also served in Ontario, Canada at the 10-Turn Congregation. He is a native of Indiana. He graduated with an associate's from Freed-Hardeman, with a bachelor's from Harding University, with a master's of theology from Harding School of Theology. And he also has many hours towards a Doctor of Ministry degree at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School in Illinois. Jim is married to Kathy. They have 2 adult children, their son James, who is here, and their daughter Marianne, who is married to Stephen Booker recently. And finally, Jim's articles and book reviews have appeared in various publications, including the Gospel Herald, 21st Century Christian, Restoration Quarterly, Bible Truth, and the Iowan, among many others. We are so blessed to have Jim here with us. I'm really excited to hear what he has to bring to us this morning. So without spending more of his time, let's bring him up and let him talk instead of myself. Jim?
Thank you for that kind introduction. When you know someone pretty well, you always have to be a little concerned about how they will introduce you, and exactly what they will reveal about you. So I'm glad for that. I'm glad for that kind of introduction. This weekend we have been talking about finances, and I'm very grateful to the church to have been here. I hope it has been a blessing to those of you who have been involved in the seminar so far, and will continue to be. And it certainly has been. It's been a blessing to me. We've talked about finances. We've talked about basically, I guess if you boiled it all down, you could say that different places in the Bible tell us to earn all we can, save all we can, and give all we can. And we have been talking about that from the book of Proverbs. But for this sermon, to sum up, I want to help put things in perspective. It's all a matter of perspective, and money is a matter of perspective. Money is important, okay? And the Bible recognizes that. The Bible says quite a lot about money, and the book of Proverbs says more about money than any other section in the Bible. So money does have importance, and we know that. It's like that delightful movie, It's a Wonderful Life. George Bailey is talking to the angel, second class, Clarence. Clarence has identified himself as an angel, but George doesn't believe it. They're talking, and Clarence has said he's come to save George, and he said, "You'll help me do that, won't you?" And George says, "Sure. You don't have $8,000 on you, do you?" And Clarence says, "Of course not. We don't use money in heaven." And George says, "Oh, I keep forgetting. Of course not. But it comes in pretty handy here, bub. So money does have importance. It comes in pretty handy here, and yet at the same time, while money does come in pretty handy and is important in our lives, and that's why we had this seminar, At the same time, there are some things that are more important than money. Uh, in another delightful piece, Cheaper by the Dozen, and I'm talking about the book, not the movie. The movie's fine, but the book's even better. In the book, there's a man who has 12 children, and when he's asked about all those children, he says, "Well, they're cheaper by the dozen, you know." That's where the title comes from. But at one point, one of his sons asks him, "Papa, do you have $1 million?" And father replies, "No, son, I don't have $1 million, but I have 1 million children. At some point, you just have to decide." And so for him, there was something more than $1 million. It was 1 million children. And the book of Proverbs identifies certain things that are more important than money. And one of the things I want to emphasize here is Proverbs recognizes the importance of money. So this is not to say that money is unimportant, but it is to say that to get the whole perspective that there are things that are more important than money. And one of these is wisdom. Proverbs chapter 3. Notice verses 13 through 18. Blessed is the man who finds wisdom, the man who gains understanding. For she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand. In her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant ways, and her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Those who lay hold of her will be blessed. I want you to notice that that this passage begins with the word blessed and it ends with the word blessed. It could be translated, although my wife questions this, "Oh, how happy." We sort of like the word blessed because it sounds more religious. But it could be translated, "Oh, how happy." And I believe that blessedness in the Bible is shorthand for the Bible's picture of true happiness. But it's happiness that comes from God. It is ultimate happiness. It is lasting happiness. It is happiness that is not dependent on circumstances. It rises above circumstances. So perhaps that takes us back to why blessed is a good word to use as well. Because it is happiness, but it's God's perspective on happiness, not what we generally call happiness. But notice, "Oh, how happy," or blessed is the man who finds wisdom. And the rest of this actually is just giving evidence for why this person is blessed. Notice, parallel to wisdom is gaining understanding. And then he begins giving the reasons in verses 14 through 18. And what he says in 14 is that she, that is wisdom, is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. A lot of people today are saying, in view of economic uncertainty, go to silver, go to gold, put your money there, and if you want to do that, that's fine. But the writer of Proverbs is saying there's something better than silver and gold. There's something better than money. There's something better than anything else we can put our money into, or anything else we can put our lives into. That what is better than that is wisdom. It pays better. Makes better returns. Mark Twain, who actually was quite a good investor, said that at one point that he wasn't so interested in return on his investment as the return of his investment. And notice what he says about wisdom. She's more precious than rubies, so we're talking about jewels. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life are in her right hand, I guess I should do it that way. In her left hand are riches and honor. All her ways are pleasant ways, All her paths are peace. Biblical Old Testament concept of peace was more than just lack of fighting. It was the idea of harmony. Harmony in relationships. Harmony in your relationship with God. Harmony in your relationship with other people. Harmony in relationship to yourself. In creation. All around. There's a sense of harmony and well-being. And wisdom brings this kind of well-being. He calls her a tree of life to those who embrace her, to those who hold to her. Those who hold to her will be blessed. So wisdom is more basic than riches. I mean, if you have to choose whether to have money or have wisdom, choose wisdom. Wisdom is more fundamental, is more basic. In 1 Kings chapter 3, the new king Solomon is offered, he's offered anything he wants. And he asks for wisdom. And God said, since you asked for wisdom and not riches or power or other things that you could have asked for, I'll just throw those other things in as well. But what Solomon had done was he had actually shown wisdom in asking for wisdom. Because wisdom is more fundamental, it is more basic, it is more important than even money. And wisdom, biblical wisdom, is both godly and practical. It's godly in that the fear of the Lord, and we'll come to that again later, but the whole book of Proverbs is bracketed by the idea of the fear of the Lord and being the kind of person that God wants you to be and viewing things from God's perspective and seeking to honor God with everything that you are and everything that you have. And true wisdom grows out of a relationship with God and a view of God and being a godly person, a person who knows God, fears God, loves God, and lives out of that. Wisdom is also practical. It's different from simply being smart. There are a lot of smart people who aren't practical. There are a lot of smart idiots out there, actually. Wisdom means not only that you can take the knowledge that you have and use it well, but it also comes from comes from God, and so it comes from His perspective. It's not simply us figuring out how things best work. It's His showing us, revealing to us how things work, and following His lead. So it's in a sense, wisdom is relative. I think about in a little different context, Charlie Munger, who you may or may not have ever heard of, but he's Warren Buffett's right-hand man, I'm sure you've heard of Warren Buffett. And in many ways, he's actually Warren Buffett's partner. But Charlie Munger said, competence is a relative concept. I realized that I needed to compete against idiots. But fortunately, there's an abundant supply of those. So wisdom, in a sense, is relative, but when wisdom that comes from God is the supreme wisdom. It's not simply worldly wisdom that we may talk about. In fact, biblically, worldly wisdom isn't wisdom at all. Wisdom comes from God, and wisdom is of even greater value in your life than money is. Secondly, turn over to Proverbs chapter 22, verse 1. A second thing that's more important than money is a good name. Chapter 22, verse 1. A good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver or gold. Parallel lines. A good name, we're told, is better than riches. A good name is parallel to be esteemed. And riches are parallel to silver and gold. This is one of the Proverbs. A number of times in Proverbs, there are what you could call better than Proverbs. This is better than that. By the way, notice he doesn't say the riches or gold and silver are bad. He just says that a good name is better. What would you trade for a good name? A lot of times people haven't thought about this, but what would you trade for having a good name, a good reputation, good esteem by other people? Do you think it would be a good bargain to have $1 million and have no esteem, have a bad name? The Bible would say you're a fool if you would make that bargain. To be esteemed, to be seen as a person of integrity, an honorable person, is very, very important and very crucial. I remember hearing a mutual fund manager by the name of Francis Chu, and somebody asked him about investing around the world and how dangerous that can be, because how do you know who you're investing with when you're going somewhere else in the world? And Chu's comment was, everywhere in the world there are honorable people. If you can find the honorable people, the honorable person, you can invest with them. Now that's the key, isn't it? How do you find out if they're really honorable or not? But that has to do with reputation, with esteem, with people who are esteemed, with people who have a good name. It's important to have a good name. In the New Testament, it's interesting. In the New Testament, in 3 John, not a really well-known book in the New Testament, but in 3 John, we are introduced to some different characters. And two of them very much have reputations. One is found in verse 9 of this little New Testament postcard. I wrote to the church about Diotrephes, who loves to be first, but he will have nothing to do with us. So if I come, I will call attention to what he is doing, gossiping maliciously about us. Not satisfied with that, he refuses to welcome the brothers. He also stops those who want to do so and puts them out of the church. Notice, Diotrephes then, I think, already had a reputation, but today he definitely has a reputation. But then there's another one here. Drop down to verse 12. Demetrius is well spoken of by everyone, and even by the truth itself. We also speak well of him, and you know that our testimony is true. Two people with very different reputations, both well-deserved. Diotrephes, who loved to be first, opposed the Apostle John and those who were with him. At the same time, there's another man who is coming from John, and who he wants Gaius, who's receiving this letter, to receive, is Demetrius. Demetrius has a good reputation. He's spoken well of by everyone, and even by the truth, which is John's way of saying, not only do people esteem him, not only does he have a good name among people, but God's truth itself speaks to it. In other words, it's all true. It's not put on in any way. We also speak well of him, and you know that our testimony is true. A good name, a good reputation, a reputation for being a godly, spiritual person of integrity is of even greater value than money. And it's something to be guarded. Warren Buffett has said it takes 20 years to build a good reputation, and it may only take 5 to destroy it. Think about that and before you do the things you do. Third, this is from Proverbs 28, verse 6. Third thing that's more important than money: blamelessness. Blamelessness. Chapter 28, verse 6. Better a poor man whose walk is blameless than a rich man whose ways are perverse. Contrast, this is better than that. He's not saying it's good to be poor, but he is saying it would be better to be poor and blameless than rich and perverse. What's it mean to be blameless? What it doesn't mean is perfect. A lot of people in the Bible are described as blameless, but none of them are perfect. The only perfect person that appears in the Bible is the Lord Jesus Christ. Everybody else is imperfect. Everybody here is imperfect. So blameless doesn't mean being perfect, but what it does mean is that you are a good, righteous person that is not open to obvious accusations of blame. One of the people in the Bible that's described as blameless is Job. Job was a good person. And that's really important in the context of Job, that God himself describes Job as blameless. And so when you start going through the book, and all these tragedies happen to Job. Job has all this money. He has it all. He has a great family. He has great wealth. He seems to have everything. And in blinding suddenness, it all goes away. He loses his wealth. He loses his family. His sweet wife advises that he curse God and die. He just loses it all. And the wisdom of their day was that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. And that's true to an extent, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way. In general, you can say good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. But in Job's case, he was a good person and bad things happened to him. His friends came to him with the traditional wisdom and said, "You must be doing something really bad. We don't know what it is. You seem like a good person, but we know you have to have actually done something really, really bad for all these bad things to have happened to you." But we know from God's perspective that from the very beginning, Job was described as blameless. It didn't mean he was perfect, but it did mean he was a good, righteous person that wasn't open to these huge charges of blame that his friends were heaping on him. Job was the same person when he was rich that he was when he was poor. And the blamelessness was more important than whether he had money or didn't have money. Do you believe that? We should believe that. That is absolutely true. Being right, being righteous, living the right kind of life is even more important than how much money you have in the bank account. Fourth, and for these last 2 points, we're going to go to chapter 15. Proverbs 15. Notice I'll read them together, and then I'm going to take them in the opposite order. Proverbs 15. Notice verses 16 and 17. Better a little with the fear of the Lord than great wealth and turmoil. Better a meal of vegetables where there is love than a fatted calf with hatred. Okay, notice verse 17 first. And these are two more better than Proverbs. Better a meal of vegetables where there is love than a fatted calf with hatred. Notice the contrast. Vegetarian meal, some people would say, well, it's healthier, so that would be better anyway. Okay, but in context, the idea is they're having vegetables. That was the normal diet. Meat was considered something that you had at a celebration. It was something richer people could have that poorer people couldn't have. It wasn't a normal staple of their diet as it is for most of us. So when he speaks of a meal of vegetables, he's talking about an ordinary meal, a plain meal. He contrasts that with a fatted calf. And notice it's not just meat, it is a fatted calf. The significance of that is in a small village, in their world, in a small village, if you slaughtered the fatted calf, you weren't just doing it for your family. The fatted calf's a lot of meat. You were probably inviting a bigger party, maybe the entire village, to some kind of a feast or some kind of a meal. But you had quite a bit of substance, or you couldn't have a fatted calf. This isn't just a little bit of meat. This is a lot of meat, a lot of expense. So there's a contrast here between somebody who has little relatively little resources, eating a meal of vegetables, and somebody who has a lot of resources. Difference between poor and rich is part of the contrast here. And then the other part of the contrast is better the poor meal, the poor lifestyle with love, than a lavish, rich lifestyle with hatred. Think about it. I can think about a wedding once upon a time where one of the families wasn't too happy about the marriage. There was a lot of money there. It was very lavish, and it was cold. Or I think about a man that I knew once who had pictured for himself what his ideal life would be. Making a certain amount of money, being at a certain place financially, and building his ideal house. And he was there. But in order to get there, his sons despised him, and he wasn't getting along with his wife. And he said to me, if it would do any good, I'd sell it all and start over again. But it wouldn't have. So what was all that money and all that prosperity that he had achieved through hard work, what was that worth when he had the fatted calf and hatred? But much better, a simple lifestyle, not much money, and love. It's a matter of perspective. But Proverbs tells us that a happy home is more important than money. You know, when we come down to the end of life, we don't say, I wish I'd spent more time at the office. Wish I'd made one more business deal. Wish I had made more money in my lifetime. But we very well may ask, we very well may say, I wish I had spent more time with my marriage partner and my kids. I wish I had done more to develop my relationship with God. I wish I had done more to develop myself as a person. We may very well say those things. In the end, it is loving relationships with other people, and especially with God, which we come to next, which are of the most importance. Money has its place, but it's secondary to a happy home. Let's go to the verse 16 now. Better a little with the fear of the Lord than great wealth with turmoil. Same kind of contrast. Very little, not much money. Great wealth, a lot of money. And notice the rest of the contrast. The fear of the Lord is contrasted with turmoil. The fear of the Lord, and we've talked about this throughout the seminar, and it's really important to do that because in the book of Proverbs begins in chapter 1 with a reference to the fear of the Lord being the beginning of knowledge, and it ends with a picture of a wonderful, wonderful lady in chapter 31, and she is spoken of as somebody who fears the Lord, and how important that is, how much more precious that is than anything else that can be said about her, is that she fears the Lord. So it brackets the entire book of Proverbs, but it's not just that. Throughout Proverbs, the fear of the Lord keeps popping up. And throughout the Bible, the fear of the Lord keeps popping up, both the Old Testament and the New Testament. The fear of the Lord, as it's being used here in Proverbs and throughout the rest of the Bible, is not simply cringing, cowering, hiding under a rock, terrified of God. If we only see that picture, we only sort of understand the fear of the Lord, only sort of. The fear of the Lord is what I call ultimate reverence for God. When I come up with a better term, I'll share it. But that's the best one I've got at this point. Simply saying reverence seems to me waters it down a little bit. But maybe ultimate reverence gets more added, especially when you describe what you mean. If we realize the truth about God, if we realize that God is the creator, He created everything in our world, He created us. He knows us better than we know ourselves. Do you believe that? He knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows ultimately what will make us happy, what will make us fulfilled. He knows ultimately what is best for us. He knows that better than we know it for ourselves. If we really believe that, then we believe that our total destiny in this world and in the world to come is in the hands of God. He is the key. It's not how much money we have. It's not even our human relationships, as precious as our family and friends may be to us. As important as those are, the relationship with Him is even more important. Ultimately, He is the center. Ultimately, He is the one who is most important to us. Only a fool would believe that and then ignore God. Isn't that right? If you really believe that, the things that I've said, then only a fool would then ignore Him and think that I know better how to live my life. I know better how to be happy. I know better how to be fulfilled. I know better. No, you don't know better. At no extra charge, I'll throw in this. If you believe three things, you can trust God with anything. It's based on three beliefs. If you believe three things, you can trust God with anything. If you believe that God is all-powerful, then that means He's got the power to do anything that needs to be done in your life. If you believe that He is all-wise, then it means that He knows exactly what needs to be done in your life. And if you believe that He is all-loving, then you believe that He will always do the loving thing for you. If you believe those three things, you can trust Him with anything. And that kind of relationship with God, a trusting relationship in which we recognize Him as the ultimate source and key to life, that's more precious, that is more important than money. Is money important? Yes, but it's not the ultimate importance. Ultimately, of all the things that I've talked about here, our relationship with God is the most important thing. Is the most important thing we've got. It's the most important relationship for our lives. It is most important for life in this world and life in the world to come. If this morning you are ready to give yourself to God in faith and obedience, we want to encourage you to do that. If you have a prayer request you'd like to bring before this group, we would like to encourage you to do that as well as we stand and sing our next song.